Hello and welcome to show 26 of the MisesUK.org podcast with me, Andy Duncan, here in England's finest small town, Henley-on-Thames. Tonight it's my very great pleasure to be speaking with the lawyer, Doctor Andreas Tiedtke from Mises Deutschland, and it's brilliant to be extending the hand of Misesian friendship to our noble German cousins. We'll be talking about the Misesian praxeology of 10 different individual state taxes and how each type has different negative effects upon human behaviour. In no particular order, these taxes are tariffs, value-added tax, progressive income tax, whoa, boo, government fees for licences and so on, contributions in general, taxes in general, all those little itsy-bitsy taxes, inflation, which we've counted in as a tax, corporate taxes, social security contributions, and that fantastic one at the end there, inheritance tax. We'll be examining how each one of these taxes wreaks its own particular kind of havoc upon a free society. We'll start with the least bad tax at number 10, and then in the opinion of Dr. Tiedtke, we'll work our way down to the very worst kind of tax. And this is all to help us figure out which taxes, as Misesians, we should try to get removed first from the back of a free society. So, guten Abend, Herr Dr. Tiedtke.
Guten Abend, Herr Duncan.
Esther, darf ich Sie duzen?
Ja, sehr gerne.
Fantastic. Oh, vortrefflich vielleicht. Wie geht es dir?
Sehr gut, danke. Es ist sehr heiß heute hier in Nürnberg, aber auszuhalten.
Und das Wetter hier ist mies, nass, mit vielen Wolken, aber sehr warm. Jetzt, wir müssen jetzt in Englisch sprechen, bevor jenes mich oder mir umbringt.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get going.
Yes.
Oh, see, I feel exhausted after that. Right. Before we do get going, I would like to know, and maybe our listeners would like to know, a little bit more about you. So just as briefly as you can, how did you come to Mises and how did you come to liberty?
Well, it was in the year 2008 when the financial crisis happened that I had my thoughts about what is money really and why did this financial crisis happen? Why did none of the top economists of the universities see it coming? And then I came to a book of Ludwig von Mises. It was about money, his first book he wrote for his PhD. And then I read his other books, and then I came acquainted with the Mises Institute in Munich, Germany. And I'm a member of this from the start in 2010, I think.
Was that money and the theory of money and credit?
Yes, I think it was the theory of money and credit, yes.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, how he wrote that in 1912.
Yes.
And more than 100 years later, people still don't understand its lessons. Okay, so let's get on to business then. Coming in from number 37. At number 10, we've got government fees for licenses and so on. Can you tell us why this is bad, the bad effect it has upon human behaviour?
Well, in general, in Germany, we have 3 coercive charges the government threatens you to pay. It's fees, contributions, and taxes. And when it comes to fees, there is a special service you pay the fees for. For instance, water, public transportation fees, kindergarten fees, municipal open air pools, and so on. So with fees, you have a special service and you can evade the fees by not using the service. Therefore, they are the less worst for me. However, in Germany, the public transportation, kindergarten, etc., are not financed fully with the fees, but the deficit is funded by taxes. So you can only a little bit evade. You cannot evade in full. This would be the case if the fees would cover all the costs of the public service, which is nearly never the case, only in certain exemptions.
Yeah, and of course, it's we're still dealing with monopoly services, so
Yes.
It's not like you can get your kindergarten tax back and go and spend it on the kindergarten you actually want. So then, moving down from number 8, Into number 9, we have contributions in general.
Yeah, contributions in general, because there you pay for the possibility to use a service. For instance, broadcasting contributions, you have it with the BBC in England too, I think, and we have it here in Germany also for our broadcast stations and television, or for sewage pipes and so on. You could evade in former times if you had no TV in Germany. Now it's different. You cannot anymore. You have to pay because you possibly could have a television and then receive the broadcasting signal.
Yeah, we have the similar problem here. It used to be you could not have a television, but I think they've moved it now to computers. So if you have a computer which could access the BBC, then it's kind of heading that way too, which is pretty terrible.
In Germany, you have to have nothing at all. It's just because you possibly could buy something like that you have to pay the contribution. So it's more a tax now than a contribution, but it has been. And the first thing to abolish here would be the broadcasting contributions. Because in Germany, the public television, the public radio stations, they serve the propaganda and indoctrination purposes of the current government. That's what they do, because they depend on funding by the government. So they have to say what the government wishes. They aren't independent at all as long as they are financed by the state.
Yeah, I saw a German TV schedule recently, and it just seemed to be programs about Adolf Hitler and Nazism and the evil of Nazism. Just endless programs on 1933 to 1945. So, moving up from number 27, coming in at number 8, we have taxes in general.
Yeah, taxes in general. Herewith, I think, no specified taxes, but the lot of taxes we have here, for instance, for alcohol, beer taxes, wine taxes, energy taxes. And taxes are for no specified service at all. Taxes are obligatory without that you would receive anything specified in return. The car of your mayor and his drivers are paid by the taxes. So taxes are in general worse than fees or contributions. With taxes, the higher the taxes are and the more taxes you have to pay, the less you can save. Therefore, with high taxes, you have to finance your businesses by debt more. So where there are taxes, more and high taxes, there is more debt. So there's more fragility in the society.
Yeah, old tax is pretty bad. Here's a shock mover here. I was a bit shocked by this one, only making it to number 7 in the charts, and that's corporate taxes.
Well, with corporate taxes, for instance, the capital gain tax, that means that the company has less capital than without the tax. And less capital always means lower wages. Well, the capital determines the marginal productivity of work. So this is, if you go fishing and you fish with your hands, you will catch less fish than if you have a fishing rod, and you will catch more fish if you have a boat and a fishing net too. So the more capital you have, the more productive is the work. And the marginal productivity of work is one factor that determines the height of the wages. Lower wages and less products. Why? Because the capital invested determines the marginal productivity of work. So for instance, if you want to catch fishes and you only use your hands, you will catch less fishes than if you have a fishing rod. And you will catch even more fishes than with a fishing rod if you have a boat and a fishing net. So with capital, it means the more capital you have, then with the same amount of work, you can be more productive. You can put out more products. So the marginal productivity of work is one factor that determines the height of the wages. That means corporate taxes, they lead to lower wages directly and less products.
I think this was clearly explained, wasn't it, by Murray Rothbard at the beginning of Man, Economy and State, about how Robinson Crusoe could make nets and fishing boats and other things if he can save. The strange thing with corporate taxes, of course, is that most ordinary voters think it's great when a government lays taxes upon the corporations, because somehow that money is free money to take and it's evil capitalism, and it doesn't harm employees at all when their companies have all of their profits removed through corporate taxes. Okay, let's get back to the chart then. Very popular with Mr. Trump, of course, recently. Coming in at number 6, we have tariffs.
Tariffs. Well, the first thing with tariffs is, or what the people think is very popular, is the tariffs have to be paid by, for instance, if you have tariffs on Chinese steel, somehow the Chinese pay the tariffs. But that's completely wrong. Nobody, no government, not the British, not the American, and not the German government can tax a Chinese citizen. Who has to pay the taxes is the customer here, who has to pay it with the prices he pays for the Chinese product. The steel would be cheaper for the German to buy if there would be no taxes. So he has to pay the full tariff, which is a tax, the full tariff amount to the Chinese exporter. And the second thing with tariffs is it hurts most the poorer people in the less developed countries. If you have tariffs for food that comes from Africa or for tariffs on steel that comes from Indonesia, then this poorer people are prevented from making business and becoming more wealthy by making business with industrial nations.
Yes, it's always surprised me, this one again. It's kind of a bit like the corporate taxes one, where the ordinary voter thinks that, say, a tariff on Mexican goods or is somehow good and somehow doesn't have to be paid.
Yes.
But of course, what it means is that you're paying more for food than you otherwise would. And we have that a lot of that in the EU, where farmers are protected through tariffs. And I always think this is weird from the socialist point of view, because what you're doing is you're starving African farmers, because one of the few things they can do is produce food, and that prevents money going to those African countries and prevents them developing, and it's just protecting these farmers and making everyone's food more expensive, and more expensive food is one of the staples of life. It's very, very strange. But let's move on then to the really naughty, nasty ones. We're getting into the exciting times now. So, number 5. Coming in at number 5, we've got social security contributions.
Well, in Germany, you have to pay coercive social security contributions for retirement, health insurance, and unemployment. So that leads to that the insurances and the healthcare system are not necessarily in accordance with the customer's wishes, but with the producer's will, with the will of the state. So these insurances must be worse than they would be if a customer of the insurance could say, no, I don't want to pay for this, or I don't want to pay that amount. I will look for somebody else who renders this service to me. But he's not allowed to. He has to pay. And the coercive contribution of the workers, it means treating the workers like inmates or wards. It's complete nonsense. If you see, the state says the workers, you are not allowed to take care for yourself when it comes to retirement, health care, unemployment insurance. But the state has to force you to pay the amount. So it's treating them like wards. On the other hand, the politicians say the same workers which are not adult enough to care for themselves, to care for their futures, are clever enough to choose the right politicians. It's like the picture as if inmates of a psychiatric hospitals would given the right to elect their wardens. Yes, it's nonsense.
Yeah, we had, I think it was Bismarck, wasn't it, who introduced pensions into, Prussia, and then he was copied by Winston Churchill and Lloyd George in the UK, and it wiped out a whole raft of small British private social security organisations and just destroyed them. Some of those remained as building societies, but you're stuck into this thing where you pay in, you don't know what you're going to get out, they can change the rules at any time, and then they spend it on other things anyway. They don't put it into a pot for you like the private organisations did. It just gets spent on whatever politically correct thing of the day is, which is bizarre. Another thing that happens in the UK is that they split Social Security into two things. There's employees' national insurance, which is the smaller part, and people know they're paying that one because it appears on their pay slips. But the propaganda is all this pays for the NHS, which everyone in the UK loves except me. But the bigger part is called employers' national security, national insurance, and you don't see that on your paycheck. It disappears before you see your gross salary. Yeah. And again, people think, oh, I can't see it, therefore it doesn't exist. And it's great that employers have to pay this employer's national insurance. Yes. So another insidious one there. Okay, we're getting to the heavy stuff now. We're getting to the big battalions of the state. So up from 21, coming in at number 4, we've got value added tax.
The value added tax is bad because of its huge amount. Next to the income tax, it's the hugest amount of taxes in Germany. It now is 19%, but tens of billions income for the state. As we said at the beginning, higher taxes are bad in general because they mean less savings, they mean more debt, they mean lower wages, and so on. So the VAT, just because it's so much value-added tax that you have to pay with every single act you buy something, it's a very bad tax. And the other thing is that it reduces the division of labor. It makes everybody poorer according to the law of comparative advantages, or the more general formulated law of higher yields in the case of the division of labor. The more division of labor you have, the more specialized the people work, the more wealth can be produced. This is a law, I think David Ricardo first formulated it with regard to external trade.
Yeah, well, we might have to argue about that later on once we're drinking our Glenfiddich after the show. I'm more of a James Stuart Mill actually invented that one, and Ricardo nicked it off him.
Yeah,
and of course it turns into Ricardism, turns into Marxism later. So
okay,
but let's not go there now. But yeah, it is, isn't it? If I might want to hire a plumber with a 20% value-added tax, there's less kind of desire for me to hire the plumber. I'll have a go at it myself. So I'm not doing the job I'm good at. And of course, the plumber's not getting as much work as he or she should be getting.
Yes, it's if you see the boom of the do-it-yourself markets here in Germany, I don't know how it's in Great Britain. It's not a thing because everybody wants to do the plumber stuff or electricity stuff at home for himself, but it's because the craftsmen are getting more and more expensive because you not only have to pay, he has to pay the income tax and so on, but on top of it, the value-added tax of 19% or 20% on everything the craftsman does. So the division of labor, which is a source for wealth, is distorted by the value-added tax.
Yeah, everyone's painting their own windowsills,
Yes.
cutting down their own trees, even though it's probably been made illegal and so on. So
Yeah.
how this came into the UK, that it was quite small value-added tax. They always introduce these things small, don't they? 1%, 2%. And then Margaret Thatcher came in and said, we're going to really rack up value-added tax, I think, to 12.5%. And we'll reduce income taxes as a quid pro quo. And of course, they've put value-added tax up now to 20%, and taxes are up again to 77%. The highest tax in the UK now, income tax, is 77%. So again, more subterfuge, more insidious work. Okay, let's move on to the big three then, the bronze, silver and gold medalists for evil taxes. At number 3, inheritance tax.
The inheritance tax leads to that there is less incentive for the people to save, but more incentive to consume. For instance, if you would have a 100% inheritance tax, this would mean that you would not save anything at all, but you would try to consume all your savings up to your death, because your children, they receive nothing. But since savings are the capital of the society and consumption means capital consumption, this would mean that we would have to work without capital again, with our bare hands. We would starve and have to live as very poor people, or in a 100% socialist society without private savings, where there's no capital at all, but only the state determines what is produced and who consumes what. And not he is rewarded then, who serves the interests of his customers best, but he who is best in threatening people with the state's force and in winning the elections by means of propaganda and indoctrination. So with inheritance tax, you can not have a society which is built on a free private market, but only a socialist society, a poorer society, a starving society.
Yeah, I think these were introduced in the UK in the Victorian times to pay for dreadful, stupid things like the Crimean War.
Yeah.
And it's been harder and harder to get out of them, and more people have been dragged into the dragnet of these things. And there is an attitude now of, I can't take it with me, I may as well spend it. And some socialist idiots on television, Channel 4 and the BBC usually, are now saying we should have 100% inheritance taxes because they have absolutely no idea about the structure of production from Hayek and so on. We are getting this kind of clamour for inheritance taxes to go to 100%. Of course, the state hates wealthy private individuals who could form a nucleus against it. So there is always that as well, that the state's using this to smash back the power of families and so on.
Yeah, that's the next point I wanted to say with the inheritance tax. It also attacks family solidarity. The smallest unit of society, the family, is weakened if parents do not save for their children, and children then want to be kind to the parents, and parents and children want to have good relationships because the wealth is going from generation to generation. It attacks the family as a very important unit of the society.
Yes, we can see that, of course, can't we, with the kind of divorce, welfare and abortion culture of the socialists in Europe, which have shrank the population down and then given rise to the Merkel's migrant millions being brought in to replace that dying and often killed population. So, in silver position, straight in at number 2, progressive income tax.
Because of a few things some people wouldn't have in mind. First, it hurts those most who serve the consumers best. So if you serve the consumers very good, you make high profits. You'll be rewarded with high profits by the consumers because you know what they want. You anticipate it best. So the progressive income tax leads to that. The successful, in the eyes of the consumer, successful persons have less capital to produce goods they want. So it hurts the customers most, which no leftist or socialist politician ever said. Second thing is that nobody is necessarily poor because another one is rich. What is an argument for the progressive income tax? They say, hey, he's rich because of other people are poor because of him. That's completely wrong. It depends on how you earned your wealth. If somebody else got poor, if you earned your wealth by serving the customers and they freely gave you the money, then you made nobody poorer, but you made them richer and wealthier. And at the end, it's better to live in a rich country than in a poor one for everybody. For those who want to trade with the people living in the rich country, and for those within the rich country, and those who come in the rich country to work there. So the rich entrepreneur is not the enemy of the customers and of wealth, but the opposite is the case.
Yeah, I think another one of these things is that socialism, to my mind, is based upon the 7 sins, and the worst sin of all is envy. And I think there's a lot of envy that comes into progressive income tax because people think, I'm on a low to medium wage, I only pay 25% income tax. But those evil rich people in the other side of town are paying 60, 70%. And all that money is being taken to provide me with government services. Isn't that wonderful? And it brings them down. It cuts off the heads of those tall poppies. But of course, those high taxes are just destroying the economy and also being used to give massive salaries and pensions and expenses to all the state employees. So a really nasty, insidious, evil tax, but not as evil as the long-standing number 1 backdoor, hidden, secret, boom and bust creating tax at number 1 for the last 375 weeks, 375 years. Inflation, or to give it its what the Keynesians would call it, monetary inflation.
Yeah, inflation, because one thing that's very tricky with inflation, it's a disguised tax. It destroys the savings of the people. Since inflation is an exponential function, it's hard to grasp for the people. Example given, if you have 4% inflation, that means that prices double in 18 years. And higher inflation of asset prices isn't measured by the state and not published. And in Germany, we had, for instance, year-to-year house price inflations. So house price rises because of money inflation. And it has been the prices rose about 9%, which means prices double in 8 years of houses. The house prices would double in 8 years if the 9% asset price inflation would stay. And it's a disguised, because it's a disguised tax. It's easier for the state to get away with it. If the state was not able to produce and inflate the money, the resistance of the taxed people would be much higher. But they don't see the inflation. It's, again, an important thing is it's not good for the economy. They always say, the propaganda is inflation is good for the economy. It's not. It's good for high indebted people, and it's bad for the savers who lose their savings. And there's the fairy tale of the propagandists of inflation, that falling, when the prices fall, when the prices go down, then the people don't buy. But this is not the case at all. If you look at technical devices, the prices of them, they drop all the time, but people buy more of it, and it's more affordable now to buy computers, and people don't stop buying computers, but they now have a tablet, a computer, and an iPhone. So this fairy tale is wrong too. The first thing to abolish, when you talk about abolish inflation, is to abolish the state monopoly to produce money, with the system of the central bank and the business banks, which depend on the central bank. If the state would not be able to produce money, he would have much more arguments with its voters and with the net taxpayers.
Which is, of course, why they do it, because if governments actually lived on the taxes they raised and had no means to have monetary inflation, then there would be taxes would be even higher than they already are, and they'd get much more resistance, which is, of course, why they turned to getting rid of gold as money and everything over the last 100 years and so on. So and we haven't even got time to talk about the boom and bust effects that monetary inflation creates, because we want to keep this to less than a 5-hour podcast. So thank you very much then, Andreas, for going through all those taxes and explaining why we should try to get rid of inflation first, then progressive income tax, then inheritance tax, then value-added tax, then social security contributions, then tariffs, then corporate taxes, then all these little taxes in general, then these little contributions in general, then government license fees. And thank you for going through all that. Before we do go, you were telling me earlier, before we started the show, that you're working on a book, or you've been working on a book. Can you tell us about that?
And the book has the title Human Interaction, and it starts there, the title Human Interaction, how society could function or should be designed from a praxeological perspective. And it starts there where Mises ended with human action, and he said we should have completely free markets, but you need to have a government. The government shouldn't be allowed to do much, only for security purposes and building the streets, and it should be organized, not centralized, but every little unit, like a county or a city, should be able to govern itself. However, up to the end, he said, and he said this not from a praxeological, scientific perspective, but more from a perspective from specific understanding, how he sees things, how a historian sees things, that this minimum government, this Manchester capitalism government, would still be necessary. And I try in my book to examine this from a pure scientific praxeological perspective. Is it necessary to have a proper society, to have a government, to have one who governs? Or is it that you have a worse society if you have a government? And there must be a scientific answer, which is not only I think or it's my opinion that, but I'm searching for the scientific answer to that question.
Well, I'm a hardcore anarcho-capitalist myself. I think there's only one man in the world who's more hardcore than me, and that is, of course, Professor Hans-Hermann Hoppe. And I think I'll stick to that now for the rest of my life. So hopefully Mises.de will publish your book details once it comes out. And if you can let me know, then I'll put a piece onto Mises UK as well once your book's all ready to go. Okay, Andreas, ik dank dich oder dir für deine Zeit heute Abend, und ich hoffe, dass wir können bald wieder sprechen.
Gern geschehen. Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed tonight's show with Dr. Andreas Tiedtke from Mises DE. While I sip a tiny amount of Glenfiddich, if you'd like to help us out here at Mises UK and you enjoyed the programme, please do post links to it on your favourite social media sites. Also, if you'd like to help us save the world and help us get rid of those taxes and all the socialists, our glorious chairman, Keir Martland, is always willing to help you remove your self-alienation by accepting any donations you might like to send us to help us keep our lights on. Please simply visit misesuk.org and go to our donate page. In the meantime, we'll be back very soon with some other fabulous guests from the world of Austrian economics. Until then, please enjoy your property and freedom responsibly.